So, welcome to this episode of Menopause Conversations. You'll notice that there's three of us on the call today, which is lovely. I'm like a sandwich between you. I hope it comes out like that when we see the recording. But my name's Samantha King. I'm a workplace menopause consultant and an NLP coach. And I am delighted to have my two next guests with us. I'm going to introduce you to Penny Finnie, who is the CEO for Egal Pads, and also Niamh D'Arcy, who's the head of UK growth for Egal here in the UK. So let me tell you how I met these two amazing individuals. So LinkedIn is brilliant, and I love LinkedIn because it's all about connecting people. And I happened to come across the post. I think it was you actually, Penny, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it was the concept of period pads on a roll, much like a toilet roll. And I was like, when you sort of have a moment yourself, you go, how did I not think of that idea? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about menstruating, about period pads. We're going to be talking about accessibility, equality, dignity, all of those sorts of things. But I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to invite our guests to introduce themselves. So Penny, let's start with you. If you can just introduce yourself and tell us, how is it that you came up with this amazing idea? Over to you.
Well, Amantha, thank you so much for having us on. And so I'm in the US, as you can probably tell. I'm in Massachusetts. And I was working at another startup in Cambridge, and an inventor sat next to me. This was during COVID. And one day he turned to me and he said, I've invented something, and I've patented it, and let's start a company around it. And so Tom's wife, his name is Tom Devlin. Tom's wife is a journalist for the Boston Globe, and she had been writing about period poverty. And there was an article that she had written, and it said, period products should be everywhere, just like toilet paper. And Tom thought to himself, well, I could make period products just like toilet paper. And sat down and designed it, realized that nobody had ever done anything like this. And so filed for the patent. And then, fast forward 2 years, we're in COVID, and so it was literally 3 years ago yesterday that we started the company. And and what's fascinating about having it look like toilet paper, here it is.
Yes, please show us. Yeah, amazing.
It really does. Is that when you show it to especially men and you say periods should be treated just like other bodily functions in the stall, in the same way that we provide toilet paper, we should provide period products. And it looks like this, they get it. You don't even have to really talk about periods. They're just like, oh yeah, it's just another thing for another bodily function, and it goes in the same place. And it completely changes the conversation, really. And so that's been super useful. And I don't think we thought about that when Tom designed it to look like this, that it would have this other impact in terms of how people thought about periods. And even when I started this company, I'm 64 years old, and some of my friends were like, why are you doing this? And I said, well, why are periods treated so differently than why are we responsible for carrying things around? And people would kind of pause and be like, I never thought of it that way, that what is it about society that has required that, women carry these products with them everywhere, and every woman's, been stuck without them. So.
And I think that's so interesting, because it's almost like there are three generations of womankind here on this call today. I find myself only just a postmenopausal person, which by definition means it's been 1 full year since I had my last menstrual bleed. Yeah. I can't tell you how much smaller my handbag is.
As a result.
Okay, so that's the first thing I want everyone to know. So, and I think really women will lean into that, because we're constantly preparing for this inevitable thing, and then to suddenly be at a stage in my life where I don't have it is bizarre almost. So that's probably the perfect time. Thank you so much, Penny. Let's come back to perhaps the other end of this wonderful continuum, which is what menstruation is. So to come to Niamh,
exactly.
as a younger woman, how is it you find yourself involved in this project, in this workplace. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I wrote my dissertation during my master's about periods, and I got into it because I wrote a different essay once about this comic book in India that's called Menstrupedia, and it was all about period education for young girls in India, and they happened to sell loads of copies of it. And a bit like the COVID time, I ended up finding myself, just on a rabbit hole somewhere on Google and came across this comic book. And because it was COVID, the founder was doing these masterclasses in menstrual education. And when I got on that call, there were so many people from all around the world that were really interested in sort of like period dignity and menstrual education. And I thought, this is a really interesting topic. And it didn't just feel like there was excitement behind it, it felt like there was real change. And so because COVID happened, that's why I ended up sort of changing my dissertation idea, because I couldn't go abroad with what my original plan was. And so I did research about how do we learn about periods and how does that impact the way that we then experience them as we go through life. And I just couldn't believe how sort of poorly educated we are in the UK about periods, and then how that impacts, the way that we don't understand our bodies properly, that diagnoses happen so much later in life. And so I then got in, I was actually a market research participant for a startup that was also in Cambridge, but in the UK. And they were developing a period pain device. And so I ended up at that company. And then a few years later, I was at a breakfast and I met this wonderful lady who happened to know Penny. And I didn't know that she knew Penny, but I was just raving about pads on a roll, saying, have you seen in America, there's a really cool company that are doing pads on a roll? And I said, that's the sort of company I want to work for next. And she was like, oh, I know Penny. And they happen to be on the same accelerator program.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said, I'll set you up on a call. And then I ended up here. But
I loved that. Isn't that
No.
like, that's karma, isn't it, Penny?
It was amazing because we were part of this. It was called Tech for Eva. It is called Tech for Eva, based in Lausanne, Switzerland. I know you're involved in something in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And it's a women's health accelerator. And that was how I got introduced to Niamh.
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
What a passionate story, Niamh. So, I mean, if it's okay, if we can just do some terms of around this topic, because I think for a lot of people, and those are menstruating people, I think there's a lot of dark spots for people in that we don't know stuff. And we talk about this term period dignity. What do we even mean by that? What do we mean by period dignity?
Niamh, you go.
Should I go? Well, I mean, I think it can kind of mean different things for different people. And when I think about, people with disabilities, that also might look different. Period dignity, it's not just about having period products that are by a sink. It actually is about how accessible are they, or are they in a dispenser? People might think that that's, a dignified enough experience to just have something on the wall, but actually is that accessible for someone that might be in a wheelchair? So I think it depends how you look at it. But I think with what we're doing at Egal, we're trying to create dignity for everybody who menstruates. And kind of, I suppose, our version, or at least the version that I go with, is that when you're in that moment when you get your period, you don't have to look around and panic and, create a makeshift pad with toilet paper. It's, and some people don't even have toilet paper with them in the store. It's about just having what you need, where you need it, and not having to go and ask and feel embarrassed. And, periods shouldn't be a stigmatized topic, and you shouldn't feel embarrassed to ask for something that you need. But we don't make people ask for toilet paper, and we all need that. It's about making sure provisions are just available, and giving someone that experience of just it being seamless. It's like, we've thought about you, and that's what everyone says about pads on a roll. It's just the most sort of person-centered design they'd seen in period product delivery, which is so nice. And I think that creates a dignified experience.
Yeah.
And Niamh, go ahead.
Sorry, Penny, go ahead.
Oh, Niamh has often talked about the fact that it also normalizes the experience by having it there, even if you're young and you don't really need it at the time. When you do, it's not this traumatic thing. It's like, oh, that's always been there, and now I need it. And but it does normalize it,
Yes.
And it really does. And I also thought, as someone who raised a child myself, children accompany women into toilets. I absolutely know for a fact every single child will go, "Mummy, what's that?" Or,
oh yeah,
"Granny,
oh yeah,
what's that?" What's that? That in itself is an education piece, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To actually talk about it, to normalize it. Curiosity, we know, that starts very young with children, and for it not to be a thing. So, I think it's so powerful, really, really and truly. So let's get into it. We wanted to really talk about this, and apologies, I actually pronounced it incorrectly. So Egal. What's behind the name? Is there anything behind the name?
Sure. So Egal means equal. And so that was sort of, why we decided to name it that. And I really, again, back to the States, but when I was 12, the Equal Rights Amendment was supposed to pass and it still hasn't. It's like, what? So it's just for us, it's one step towards, equal rights is being provided for equally in the bathroom. So
yeah, absolutely, and that makes such sense. So what is the data that supports your product, either in the US or here in the UK? Do you have any data? Because obviously, I mean, I go into workplaces. The very first things, this will make you laugh, Niamh, particularly, I think. So I go into workplaces, and often one of the things I say is, if I was to have a flooding episode, how would you be looking after me? You usually see the whites of their eyes go like that. Like, sorry? And I asked that question deliberately to shock people, because certainly in perimenopause, I never had a hot flash. I mostly had cold flashes. That isn't the predominant thing that people with female biology are dealing with. 40% of people have heavy menstrual bleeding at any one time. So it is a thing that people are having to deal with, and that's why the bags are so big coming into work, etc. So what do you have in terms of your data that says, do you know what, either period dignity, lack of accessibility, that these are key touch points in our society?
Well, one of the things that we do, and I've got one of the dispensers here to show you.
Oh my gosh, like one I made earlier. That's brilliant. I love that, Niamh.
Here it is. But you can see there's a QR code on there. And so what we tend to do with different businesses or organizations we go into is create a personalized sort of sticker for their brand and a QR code. And then we ask a series of questions, and we get such amazing feedback, or, just really interesting feedback about how people's experience was using the pads, but also opening it up of, is there anything else that, the organization can do to support you? And so we're talking about menopause. One of the interesting things that came out of this with one of our clients in the UK is somebody said it was such a powerful sort of opener of like this new thing in the toilet. I think it's so symbolic of, we're here for your needs. And it was one of the questions, what else can we do? And one of the answers was, actually the aircon needs to go on for longer, and also an hour before we get into work, because going through the menopause, experience hot flushes, the office doesn't often get cold until later on in the day. And that was just a really small adjustment that the facilities manager often is a man and doesn't really know what to do, but it opens up that conversation, not just about period and product access. It's about the whole kind of thing, and it's just showing people we're here for you and allowing that conversation. What else can we do in quite like a discreet way as well? So
I love it. That's so clever, isn't it? And there's, I don't know if you know this, but all the original trial work around air conditioning was all done on the temperature settings of men. Did you know that? No surprise there.
No surprise there.
No surprise there.
Well, yeah, and that's oftentimes too why sometimes it's just too cold. You have to wear, so interesting. Yeah, I mean, Niamh's right that those QR codes are super interesting. Another thing that we've found people talking about, like in the airport, for example, is, some people have said, well, I no longer get my period, but I suffer from incontinence. And so I'm using this pad for that, and so that's been another, again, a side effect of having children and all of that has been useful. And probably the facilities managers weren't thinking about that either,
No.
I mean, one facilities manager from a bank emailed us. We had given her the product at a show, and she emailed us like 3 months later. She said, this is the best product we never knew we needed.
Wow,
And I
that's
love that,
amazing. That is
because
so amazing, isn't it?
yeah,
Because we find, and maybe you find the same, there is a stigma, a silence, a taboo in terms of sort of sharing, talking, discussing these things. People
yep,
are game facing,
yep,
rather a lot. And I think that's generally true of a lot of women's health experiences.
yeah.
So how did you manage to convince an airport to stock your product? Because
So that,
I think that's so inspiring, really and truly. As a new person coming into a new country, if that is the reception you're met with,
yeah,
I think it tells you everything about that you
tells
need
you
to know.
everything, right?
Yeah.
So we were talking to the Denver airport, and first they wanted to do it for their employees. They have 40,000 employees at the Denver airport. 40,000, 25,000 of them were women. So first they wanted to do it for the employees. They did that, and I think that went really well. So then they were like, well, let's try it in the terminals. So we thought it'll probably be a 3, because we do pilots oftentimes because it is a new product. So we said, okay, we'll probably do a 3-month product with them. After 2 weeks, they contacted us and said, we're good. We want to, put it throughout the entire airport. And they said that the feedback that they were getting was so positive. And again, it's kind of like the product we never knew we needed. People were, and because, as Niamh mentioned, we put the name of the place on it. So it says, brought to you by Denver Airport, or compliments of Denver Airport, whatever it is. So people were saying, thank you, Denver Airport, for, thinking about your customers this way,
Wow.
and so they
Wow.
realized it really became a marketing, for them. It's, and, you start looking, these airports are really not competing with one another, but they are trying to make the experience as positive as possible, because airports have been pretty grim for the past 20 years, ever since 9/11, and all that we have to go through, and we have to spend a lot of time in airports
Yes.
because of all of that. And so making them as nice as possible, is something that the airports have realized they need to do. And so this is just a part of that.
And I mean, it's like when you think about the sort of the journey you make through the airport, once you've got through security, there isn't a much, you are going to have to fashion your own
Yeah,
pad out of toilet paper. And I know everyone listening to this will have done that at some
we'll have
stage.
done that.
Will have done that,
Absolutely.
because that's what we have to do. We just have to keep
Yep.
calm and carry on, and just hope that you're not on a really long haul flight without delay. So it's vital, isn't it?
It's vital.
Yeah.
Well, Niamh had made the really good point. We were in Switzerland. We went to Switzerland for the Women's Health Innovation Summit of Europe, and we won the innovation award there. But Niamh, the first time, oh,
Congratulations.
thank you. And it was the first time I actually met Niamh in real life. But you made the
Oh,
point, Niamh. Tell me about what you said about coming through customs.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, it was the first time Penny and I met, and we were in this sort of bar where everyone from the conference met the night before. And Penny said, "How was your room?" Because we'd checked in at different times and then met in this bar. And I thought Penny said, "How was your womb?" And I thought, how did Penny know I just got my period at the airport? And it was so on brand to kind of go on a
brilliant.
talking about periods, and I got my period at the airport. But it was a nightmare. I was already running late for my flight, and then you have to go into Boots. And I was just glad that I went to the toilet there before it actually got to the gate. Because once you're
Yes.
by the gate, there's
That's
really
what I
not much.
mean. That's what I
Uh,
mean. It's a
Yeah.
disaster, isn't it? And such a worry. I mean, it's just I think that's the thing. It's a bit like, if we helped other people understand what it's like to have a hot flash, I think we can help people understand what it's like to have to suddenly, like if men were to imagine suddenly becoming incontinent,
Mhm.
what would you do?
What would you do?
What would
Well,
you
and
do?
what would you do? And as Niamh, as you pointed out, you may not remember this, you said, but once you get on the plane and have to go through customs, there is literally nothing from
That's what I
when you've
mean.
gotten on
Yeah.
the plane to all the way through
All the
getting
way
through
through.
customs.
Yeah. And then you
And
have to get, a taxi or a tube or
exactly, then there's
whatever.
nothing. There's
Yeah,
nothing
and
there.
then when you get to
You
your
go
hotel, there's
straight
nothing.
to get your bags, and then, so you've got like several hours where there's literally nothing, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so can you tell us a little bit about the pads? Because as someone who, you know, I always had to have heavy flow stuff. Like, I mean, when I was at my worst, I can remember, you know, just constantly getting through these things. I mean, you know, a couple of things that are popping through my mind, and I know you'll have already considered, which is, you know, how much flow can these pads hold at any one time?
Yes. So these hold 30 milliliters, which is, you know, it's more average, but but that is a lot, you know, for any given time. So the good news is you can come back and get another one.
Yeah.
Generally they last 4 to 6 hours, for the average person. So, you know, that we do say, well, you can come back and get another. But yeah, 30 milliliters is in the US, it's 2 tables. Well, it's, you know, that much.
Yeah.
You know, so they are very basic. They are, this is what they look like. They don't have wings.
Yeah.
The adhesive is very strong on the back. And so they are simple, and they've got, so this is our we have two versions that are about to come out. This is the regular one. And then we have a plant-based plastic one that will be out at the end of the year.
Amazing.
So this one is very thin because it has SAP paper in it that actually probably expands beyond, you know, it's like the diapers that
what is SAP paper, Penny?
It's super absorbent paper. So
Super absorbent paper.
yeah,
okay.
and it's got little gel-like things on it that expand. So like children's diapers do, you know, the modern diapers.
Amazing.
And yeah, and then the non-plant-based won't have the SAP paper in it, so they are a little bit thicker, and they have gutters as well to, you know, sort of make sure that everything expands throughout the whole pad, but then the gutters prevent it from leaking.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. And often a rebuttal we get when we talk about having period products available in toilets is like, oh, well, people will just take them. People are just going to take them. I mean, I literally just go, can I honestly tell you, I can't think of anyone who would be stockpiling their bag with stuff like that, because it's not that mentality, is it?
Well,
I mean, what
exactly.
do you observe? Because do people take the whole roll?
No. So first of all, it's in a little locked dispenser, but you know, it's so interesting. When we first started the company, again, you know, going from 10 to 30 states, which have passed these laws in the 3 years, it has become normalized to start to see free period products. You know, we've created such a scarcity mentality that you would think, you know, when people initially might see them, they might take a few. However, we've been working with this entity called Throne Labs, and Throne Labs makes these portable public bathrooms that are really nice. You access them either through your smartphone, or if you're homeless, you're given a card that gives you access to them. And they are put around parks where there's sporting events or concerts. They're put all over cities. And so they were putting them in Fairfax, Virginia. And the mayor of Fairfax had said, please, let's put one over near Home Depot, because there's a homeless encampment there, and I'd like to have the Egal pads in there. And so we were like, well, this is going to be interesting to see what happens near the homeless encampment. And they came back to us after a month and they said, this is really interesting, but there was no theft. We could, you know, it was being used, but not at a rate that, because people realized that we restocked it and they didn't have to take them. It was always going to be there for them. And so why take them? Why have to carry around more stuff, you know? And so, and that is and there's also a feeling of respect that people feel like and that's why we put the name of the place that's done it. You know, you are taking care of me, so I'm not going to misuse this right that essentially you've given me, or this respect that you've given me.
I really like that. That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's not lost on me. I was Googling, obviously the Olympics has just finished. I was like, okay, where's the Olympics taking place in 2018? Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
I can't think of a more important, that having just finished the Olympics,
Yeah.
there have been some companies in this space that have been criticised for the lack of availability of products.
Oh yeah.
We did mention that company offline before we started recording this, by the way. I've seen it blow up on social media, the lack of availability of period products. So we know that there is scope for it, but I find that research fascinating, Penny.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have anything to add to that, Niamh?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to thinking, about the person-centered design of events, and it goes into the infrastructure. And that's what I love about what we're doing, because it really is reimagining like the basic infrastructure of what goes into a toilet. And at one point, toilet roll wasn't even in the cubicles. That was only
Right.
100 years ago. It was popularized into the actual
Is that
cubicle with a
right?
toilet roll holder. Yeah, it used to be flat sheets by the outside, and people would take what they need inside. And I kind of think with period products, we're still 100 years behind, but that growth and sort of change of mindset is happening. And I think once, it's things like Egal that come out, and it allows an easy solution to then be installed. But I think a lot of people still don't know about us, which is a shame. But I think, yeah, with the Olympics and the stadium, you can't imagine why somebody that kind of is in charge of that wouldn't perceive, what about if people have a period and they can't leave, they've just paid thousands of pounds to come here, or
Exactly.
euros or whatever, and I think that's where we kind of also position ourselves really as well, as when people can't leave somewhere or they really don't want to leave, we're a perfect place for that, because it is the spare tire that gets them through that match. If you were at the Olympics, you're watching your favorite sport, and you're about to get your period, you don't want someone sitting there and being worried. You want them just feeling taken care of, and it's part of that whole Olympics experience for them. Especially women in sport, women in sport don't get enough representation to begin with. And I think this is such a small thing that stadiums can do as a nod of, you are included here, and we do think about your needs. And it's part of the rhetoric of a bigger conversation about inclusion. So
Exactly.
yeah, it was quite shameful that it wasn't there, but it's exciting because I think the next Olympics, they're going to have to be there after the
Gonna
Olympics.
Well,
have to.
Penny's got anything to do with it. My goodness.
Well, I mean, I've got a son who lives in Los Angeles. He's gonna no, in the stadiums here. We're in Twickenham Stadium in the UK,
Okay.
and we're in Wells Fargo Center in the US. But one of the reasons we've targeted stadiums is in the US now, they even fancy bag makers sell clear bags, clear, nice looking bags, because you have to take clear bags in. They have to be scanned. No money is allowed. And a distributor was telling us that he went to a football game in Florida with his daughter. She got her period. They were told they had to go to the security guard because there was nothing in the bathroom. So, and they go to the poor security guard. He's like, I don't have anything, and they ended up leaving the game. And so the distributor was like, I never had experienced this before. But it's, part of it's a confluence of things happening. The clear bags are something that's relatively new, and so there you go. People don't want to carry around things in clear bags. And so, that's what happened. And but I think that we were joking. I don't know if you got to see the end of the Olympics, but they had a whole thing with Tom Cruise going and parachuting into LA, and putting up the symbol on the Hollywood sign.
Yes.
The Olympics. And I was like, God, if only those 5 circles could be these.
That would have been well, there's still hope. There's still time. You've got 4 years, Penny.
You've got 4 years.
You've got
exactly.
4 years to get cracking. But I thought also as well, didn't we have somebody who actually started their period? She got her period. I'm kicking myself. I can't remember which athlete it was, but she got her first period at the Olympics after the birth of her son. It arrived when she was competing. So I think this is the thing, isn't it? We're just not thinking of people. We're thinking of people in one context. We're not
Mhm.
thinking of them as living, breathing people with biological systems that are unpredictable, and all of these sorts of things. And I love what you said there about that spare tire analogy, Niamh. I think that is brilliant, because yeah, you want to keep going, don't you? But actually, and my daughter often says, the thing about our periods, and I think we've got a massive education piece to do. I think there are times where you welcome your period, there's other times when you don't, but it is a natural part and status of who we are. So we're already hyper vigilant, I think, most of us, about that thing every month. We don't need to be more vigilant than we already are. Because I think that creates more anxieties for people. If you could go to a stadium without that big bag and knowing no one's going to search and tip out that whole big bag. I mean, I used to think, God, I hope no one tips mine out, because honestly, I could set up a shop.
No,
this
it's
pad,
true.
that pad, that tampon, that intimate wipe, those tissues, just in case you need to make something for yourself. Oh, and a little perfume bag, because no one wants to smell that on. I can remember traveling feeling like quite a traumatic thing.
Oh, yeah. It just takes up too much space, and
yes.
And talk about what you're doing with the marathon.
Yeah, so we're also working with London Marathon, which is great, because it's
Tell
one
us
of those
about
things.
that.
Well, especially I think if we're not yet in the cubicles for the race. That's happening next year, hopefully. But when you think about race days, for example, and use of it for incontinence, you don't want to be slowed down at all. You've been training for this for God knows a year or something, or maybe more. And just having what you need where you need it would just make it, so much more of an enjoyable experience, and you don't need to worry. But I think what you said about, as well, periods being unpredictable, and sometimes I don't think this message is often sort of shouted out enough, because some people just think, oh, well, you have your period and you know when that's coming. And I've come up against this a lot. And even by women who have, very predictable periods, that say, well, when you're going to get them. And that would be quite unusual for it to randomly come. And actually, I start off every presentation with a slide that says periods are predictably unpredictable, because, your first ever period, you can't predict that. And going back to the bag thing you said at the beginning, I remember when I was younger, it wasn't that you took your sanitary products or your period products out of your bag after you'd finished your period. You were always carrying them around the whole month in case one of your friends had started, or, we didn't know when we were going to start our period. And even when you did, you knew that there was be a friend that might get their period for the first time, or that, they've just come on as well. So it takes, up to a year, or on average, for your periods to regulate as well when you're younger. And then obviously once you've had a child, your hormonal system changes, and you can't predict your periods. And then perimenopause, that's when it's very erratic. And I just think there's so much to be said and educated to people about the fact you don't know when your period's often going to come. But also, why do we make people so stressed? And sometimes I just always think, now Egal are everywhere, so I often go out without products, and I'm like, no, we're not there yet.
No, not by any stretch. And actually, you reminded me, I wanted to just make people aware. So the work that we do, we get exposed to so many great initiatives. British Standard 30416 actually is an amazing document. And if anyone watching this, it talks about the build element of menstruation, and it actually gives advice about what facilities should look like, even down to lighting.
Oh, wow.
All those sorts of things. So I'll definitely get you a copy and send that to you. But that is an amazing document that I think certainly could help with what you're endeavouring to do, because you're absolutely right. I mean, we know that patriarchal sort of systems have meant that the stalls toilets are narrow. They actually, in terms of design going forward, should have a small sink in them so people can sort themselves out. If you had the Egal roll as well, somewhere, a hook for people to hang stuff, they can sort themselves out, put a bag. The dignity element increases massively for people. And people are willing to bring stuff to sort themselves out. But, it even goes as far as to say, well, are we providing lockers for people? Are we providing shower facilities? I've been in some toilets where they actually have a small handheld shower handle head in some toilets. So much like a toilet in terms for those who have a disability. There is
Right.
an area where people can sort themselves out. And so I think that document could be really helpful to you. And for organizations and businesses watching this, the Egal solution is a really positive step in that direction. I appreciate people can't knock down toilets and start from scratch, but actually, as an intermediate part, this could be really, really helpful, couldn't it? To actually show people that we do recognize that the build quality is maybe not fit for purpose, but here's something that we can do in the
interim.
in the interim period.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, when we first started and we were talking to some of our distributors, and they said, well, what's wrong with those vending machines that go by the sink? And luckily, half of our team or a third of our team is male, and Jay, who's our COO, he turned to the person who asked this question. He said, I always thought women understood when they were getting their period, but they don't. And they don't know it until they go into the stall. And he said, and that was a real surprise to me. I thought women always knew, but they don't know. And so the guy who is asking the question said, so you mean they go in, they figure it out, and then they have to come out and go to that vending machine? And Jay was like, yeah. And he was like, well, then those make no sense at all. So it was interesting watching that realization.
Brilliant.
Oh, but men think, I think most men, if you ask them, would think, oh, well, they know. It's like, no, they don't,
No.
So
I had a very similar conversation with a distributor who said that he was struggling to kind of get people on board with it, because they said, well, the traditional dispensers, they're a lot less messy. And I said, what do they mean messy? And they said, well, if you have something in the actual cubicle, people are probably just going to put the wrappers on the floor, because with the dispensers outside, people put the wrappers in the bin, and then they go into the store with like a naked tampon or the pad already undone. And I said, were these men that you were talking to? And he said, yes. I don't think they understand, because I don't know anyone that ever unpackages their period product before they go into the cubicle.
No.
And, it is kind of crazy and that's the education piece that really kind of has to happen, I think, about, you don't realize when you're going to get a period. And when you do, you don't deal with it outside. You deal with it in the actual cubicle itself.
And and that's so powerful. I mean, I love Instagram and I hate it in equal measure. But what I did love about this topic was they actually were polling a whole load of people on a high street in a city in Europe somewhere, and it was fascinating. I think I posted it on my LinkedIn profile, because there was only one guy out of a group of 6 who actually knew which orifice menstrual blood came out of. And I think even that, I mean, I know, and I think it's that, isn't it? It's like, the minute we start helping educate people, we start, it's not just about, going to the toilet anymore, is it?
Yeah.
It's about actually, I mean, like you said, I mean, I'm imagining if I peel that thing off any pad, it's going to be stuck to me, and then I just won't be able to get it off. And if I do get it off, it's going to be covered in fluff and lint. So you're absolutely right. I think people with female biology are very savvy. You're already 3 steps ahead of yourself, going, okay, I'm going to get that, I'm going to take that into the toilet, I'm going to hang my bag there, and you're already in it, doing it. So I think it's great, and I love the fact that you're challenging these stereotypes. I mean, it might take another 4 years, possibly, but it sounds to me like you're winning hearts and minds. And certainly when I've been talking on your behalf, I mean, I don't know if you remember, Niamh, we booked in to have a half an hour chat one day, didn't we? I mean, it was like literally like an hour and a quarter later, we were still going, because it was so fascinating. I was like, I really need to go now. I was parked in a lay-by somewhere, but it was so interesting. And and the reality is, we know that train operators, for example, are really, really liking the idea. Some of the companies we're working with are really thinking, you've got these amazing toilets on board trains, but these amazing toilets aren't adequately kitted out. And then you've got to go and try and find someone, if you did have a problem. How are you meant to do that? I don't know.
How are you supposed to do that? I mean, a train and a plane really are those places where or a bus, where you are,
you're trapped,
out of luck. Trapped.
And when you think about trains as well that get in late at night, you know, that's a lot of people's commute home or something like that, that might be getting the last train from London to Manchester. And then you get to that station and everything's closed as well. And then you've got to get home. And it's not that people think, oh, you can just go to, you know, a Tesco's down the road and pick something up. It's actually also, once you've picked that up, can you find an open toilet to then go and use?
Right.
Exactly. And it's because even that is difficult, isn't it? My daughter and I were out yesterday, and we were out in a very rural area, and of course we went to the communal toilets. They're all locked. But I used to be a GP sales rep working in the pharmaceutical industry, so I went to my daughter, don't worry, because I took her to the local doctor's surgery, and I went in there, and she went, how did you know to do that? I said, because you learn when you're trapped in a car, like traveling all day, every day, you learn to know where the toilets are and stuff. But actually, I know for a fact there was nothing available in there. So then the stress levels are off the charts, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
And you know, and that's not good for anybody. So is there anything I haven't asked you that actually would be a good question that you can ask yourselves and tell us about, Egal, and what it is you're doing?
Well, what you were just saying made me think of this. In the US, 62% of women have to leave work because of no period products. But, you know, some of those people may work in cities, so it's just a question of going down to the, you know, walking a couple of blocks. But if you work at, you know, the Honda manufacturing plant or the Tyson's chicken packing place, those places are out in the middle of nowhere, as you were discussing. And you have to drive a long way to go and find something. So this whole period positive workplace initiative, we are actually trying to focus on those types of manufacturing jobs where, you know, we're doing a pilot at Mondelez, which they make 40 billion Oreos a year. I love
just
that
the 40
number.
billion. Is that all?
40 billion.
Oh,
And they have 18 manufacturing plants around the world. And so, you know, other large manufacturing places, they're always out a long way from anything. And so I really want, you know, to focus on that initiative in the workplace.
And it's similar as well in the UK. We met somebody at a conference, and he helps run a pharmaceutical park. And he said, actually, I'm thinking about the people who menstruate who work here, and some of them are on night shifts on their own, and you know, they're out in the middle of nowhere as well. What do they do? And before I'd even sent a follow-up email, he'd messaged me to say, I've sent out a survey asking questions and seeing if the people would like to trial this. And I think it was like a day later, he was like, so many people want to trial this because they were like, you know, this makes so much sense. And similar in hospital settings.
Hospitals.
Penny and I did the NHS Confed show, and it was amazing because so many people were telling us, you know, in GP practices, we had quite a lot of interest actually from them, but with hospitals, it wasn't even a case of being able to leave work. So many women, and the majority of the NHS is made up of women employees anyway, have to just bleed through their uniform while they're working through their scrubs. And back to the dignity thing we started with, you know, that is such an undignified way of allowing people to work that are already overstretched and overworked, aren't being paid enough. And it's just a small thing like that of having, you know, products where they need it. When you think about a hospital and how large it is, you know, a lot of them say they don't even take their normal toilet breaks that they would normally need. And then they might have products with them, who knows, or they might be able to get them somewhere, but you have to go across a hospital. You're already, you know, choosing between, do I look after this patient that really urgently, critically needs my help, or do I go to the toilet? And so really small things like that, I think, can just provide so much, people feeling valued by their workplace, you know, and it's the basics.
The basics. That's the thing.
And it enables people to be productive. I mean, it's so interesting. And my mum was a nurse for 35 years in the NHS, and she was an orthopedic nurse, so a lot of lifting, so bone traumas and things like that for people. And my mum, much like my sisters and myself, all have had heavy menstrual bleeding as part of our life course. And I can so remember my mum in her beautiful crisp white uniform. My mum would come back mornings, and my mum was heavy bleeding so badly that she had to have blood transfusions.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so really, like, you know, very, very so flooding, as we call it.
Yes.
And my mum, I mean, she's so stoic, but my mum used to take incontinence pads and fashion herself a
Right.
super duper pad and just keep going. And I always knew that my mum had had a bleed that had gone into her uniform when I saw my mum come back with her coat wrapped around her waist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But because she was so stoic, she would work through that.
Yeah.
And you sort of think it's not acceptable. We should be
No.
supporting people to do the jobs, you
Exactly.
know, that they're already doing it as a vocation. They're not doing it, certainly not in
Exactly.
the UK, for the money.
No. No.
Or the
Yeah.
thanks, to be quite honest. So it is really, really vital. And yes, you're absolutely right, night shifts. We've done a lot of work in pharmaceutical companies, and I myself take great joy, Penny, doing menopause awareness sessions at 11 o'clock at night, to mostly men who are on factory lines, because menopause affects partners as well.
Yes,
And
exactly.
you know, you're absolutely right. Do you know that actually, particularly in healthcare, if you have a bleed of any kind, they cannot stop the production line. So
Really?
we have had a number of conversations in very complex workspaces, actually saying, well, what provision have you got for people, either for someone to take over, where is the nearest toilet? And in some organizations, we found it was on a totally different site.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Wow.
So it's like,
whoa.
what? I've got to go across the car park to go and sort myself out.
What? Oh my
So
gosh.
and change of uniform, because you're dealing in high grade sterile areas.
Yeah.
The clothing has to be a certain color, usually
Yeah.
white, ironically, you know, the worst color for those of us menstruating. So we were able to have all of these conversations, and how can those garments be disposed of in a way that maintains someone's dignity? There's not like, oh, Amantha's had a bleed, you know, it's not like
Right.
really obvious. So
Yeah.
these
Right.
things are all wonderful, and we even got them to put together rucksacks and things so that people could access that if there wasn't a toilet nearby. So you can see how
No, that makes
things like
sense. Yeah.
things like having an Egal pad, like if there was a locker, you could have that bolted into a locker.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's not difficult, is it? It's like,
No,
it's like the solution is only as difficult as we want to make it,
as we want to
really.
make
And
it.
it sounds to
Exactly.
me like you've come up with an absolute corker. So where do we go from here? I mean, in terms of your aspirations, let's sort of crystal ball gaze, which I love doing. Let's imagine we're about to arrive on the cusp of the 2018 Los Angeles Olympics. Brilliant. What would you hope? How far do you hope we will have got by that, in that stage, Penny and Niamh? What would your hope be in the US and in the UK? What do you hope we will achieve with Egal?
Well, I mean, I think what Niamh said is, you know, I sometimes think I live in Egal land when I go out without taking my period products with me. But that would be the goal, which is to have them wherever you need them, particularly in the places like stadiums, museums, hospitals, you know, airports, you know, train stations where you can't leave, you know, and
Yeah.
workplaces. And you know, I think to just normalize it in the workplace makes all the sense in the world too. And you know, it's great that the schools are mandating it, but I think, you know, I want, you know, to think much broader than that. And so that's where I hope we get. But, you know, the other thing that happens, you know, because we've gotten into some of these big places like airports, is that you have people going through and realizing, oh, this is an amazing product. I'd like to take it back to my workplace.
Yes.
So if we could get it into the Olympics or some of these places where a lot of people from all over the world are coming and seeing, you know, oh, wow, what an amazing solution. Niamh, what about
Definitely.
you?
I love you. Yeah. What about you, Niamh?
Yeah, I think all of what Penny's just said, but also I think the US are ahead of us in terms of their provisions in schools. And what I'd really like to see in the UK is better menstrual education and better access to products. And we know in schools in the UK that there is a period product budget, and the budget actually doesn't get used by schools fully in the UK every year. They're not using up their budget, even though 1 in 5 have period poverty. And so, you know, out of a school, there is, you know, 20% of those students need access to period products, and they could get them from the school and they're just not getting them. And so a bit how Penny referenced this earlier, but I love the idea. And actually it's on this box, so I'll just show you because it's a powerful picture. of these two things next to each other. And I just think if you grew up seeing that next to each other, you would feel like periods aren't this big thing that's going to happen and it's really scary. It's like, yes, it's a change, but it's a change where you're not going to feel freaked out or anxious. And I know, Amantha, you know Joyce Harper, and she's just amazing. I have to get her into every conversation I have.
Right.
She really is. She's doing great stuff in schools, and she's raising this awareness as well that actually students aren't getting access to the products they need in the UK. And we need to change the conversation and bring it back to dignity and education, and that actually seeing things. And we all know this, you know, if you see representation, you feel more represented. And if you see sort of inclusion visibly, like through pads on a roll, and just having this, getting rid of this notion of concealment that we've created with period products, that they're hidden, that we have to put them up our sleeve when we go out of class, or, you know, we have to go and ask for them. I just think going and asking for products that are a basic necessity is just demeaning. And I think in schools in the UK, we need to have a really, really big change up about the way that we see this and we deliver it. So there's a budget for it, and we're just not using it properly.
What is the budget under, Niamh? What does it come under?
It's under the Department for Education. So all state mandate, all state schools in the UK have access to this, and I believe colleges as well.
For menstrual products.
For menstrual products, yeah.
Okay.
And however, the thing that I became aware of that I wasn't, you know, when I was in the UK is that, yes, there is this mandate that, you know, menstrual products have to be available, but the focus is more on making sure that kids have something that they can take home, that they have something at home, but there's not a focus on making sure that they have something when they are in school, available when they need it in school.
And, you know, I've heard some, and I'm not going to try and guess it, so I'll caveat all of this with I don't know the exact figures, but I remember hearing about the impact of missing one day of school due to menstrual bleeding. It's phenomenal in terms of how it disadvantages people, isn't it? It's really staggering. In fact, I think it's like it can represent, you know, if you miss school because of menstrual bleeding, it's like you may as well miss 8 days of learning, and that is disadvantaging people unnecessarily.
It really is. And I think as well, you know, people that are experiencing period poverty and having something to take home later in the evening isn't ideal still, because if you bleed through your clothes, who's to say that that person is able to wash their school uniform that evening? They might not have access to a washing machine, and they likely not have another, you know, pair of trousers or skirt to put on. And it's kind of seeing the whole picture of not just, okay, what does bleeding look like for that 15-year-old girl in that context? It's like, how does then that impact the way that it is at home when she goes home? And also, how does that impact the way she sees her periods? You know, it's then going to be an inconvenience and something that's embarrassing. And actually, we need to change this conversation, because we've got periods for a very long time. And then, you know, we need to kind of more embrace that. But you can't expect people to embrace it when it brings them so many issues.
Much anxiety.
And so many sort of demeaning experiences. So,
I just feel like I wish I worked for Egal.
I know, come along.
It's like, oh God,
we'd love to have you.
It's so exciting. It's so
well. Amantha, let's get it out there, and then come join our team.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't think of anything I'd like more. Because I just think it's just such. It doesn't need to be a thing, and I love listening to both of you speak. It's so obvious to me why you work so well together. It's just like, it's like fantastic, and your belief and your passion, and you are changing things. I mean, to get a like massive airport like Denver Airport. So I'm gonna throw down a gauntlet here in the UK to the biggest airports. So we've got Gatwick Airport, Heathrow Airport, Manchester Airport, Liverpool Airport, all of these, Bristol Airport, which is my local airport. It's possible, because if one person can do it, the rest of you can jolly along. And I would appeal to all those sporting events. I've got quite a lot of ex-Olympians that follow my account. So we've got Sally Dunnell, who follows our account. We've got Michelle Griffith-Robinson. We've got a whole load of people. Actually, as sports people, can they get behind this? Because that would be massive, wouldn't it? If we could get some of these really big names in sport behind this. And I know Michelle knows Dame Denise Lewis as well. So you know, that would be amazing. So I'll tag them into our conversation because I think they would be so interested in this. And I think, you know what, I'm ashamed to say, I think women, we often just think, well, I've had to crack on and deal with it. Everyone else is doing the same.
Exactly.
And I think we need to bust that narrative.
Yeah.
As far away as we can. That would be amazing. So tell people how they can get involved with you, either to buy your product, to come into a pilot scheme with you with your product, to just even research it a little bit more about themselves. Where can they find you?
So, well, our URL is padsonaroll.com.
Padsonaroll.com.
Yep. Our Instagram is pads-on-a-roll. And our LinkedIn is Egal Pads. What else? And then there's info at padsonaroll.com.
And I've just set up our TikTok today, so that's
Have
at Pads
you?
On a Roll. Yes, yeah. Because
Brilliant.
somebody did a TikTok on us, and we got so many views and comments, and I'm like, we've got to
We
enter
have
the
to have it.
TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
thank you, Niamh.
I love it. I love it.
That's
I don't
great.
know how good it's going to be, but there'll be Pads On a Roll content.
Well,
so,
I mean, we're the reason we're going into Japan is that we've been getting these amazing TikTok videos, and because there was an article written about us. Well, anyway, so yeah, so great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's good. That's all right.
Yeah,
but,
and it's so good to be in all these places because it's an intergenerational conversation.
It completely is. It completely is, and
isn't it?
That's what's been so. I mean, the energy and the passion and the of literally people all over the world for this has been just staggering to me. That's what just keeps us going. For sure.
Well, I've already thought, Niamh, I would really, I'm going to introduce you to Helen Tomlinson, who is globally the first menopause dedicated champion.
Wow.
And so she works with the Department of Work and Pensions here in the UK, and we have a group which is No Time to Step Back. And so I would love to invite, I'm going to straight after this, send an email because I think that's how we get big businesses involved. You know, like
absolutely
Lloyd's Bank Group, you know, Serco, Tesco's, you know, that's how we open up the conversation.
That would be amazing. Yes.
So let's do that after the call today. And do you know, it's so brilliant, the work that you're doing. I just think it's the beginning. I'm genuinely excited for you. I'm like an excited puppy, but it's not my puppy. But you know, I'm
well, we'd like to make it your puppy.
But it's so good. I just wish it had been around for me during my time. But when I think about my daughter and the concerts and things that she would like to go to and traveling, and she got stuck in the airport during that Microsoft thing. I mean, again,
oh my God.
Can you imagine if you were menstruating then?
Exactly.
I mean, it'd be an absolute blinking nightmare. So yeah, let's do more talking. I'm sure we will do. But for now, Penny Finnie, Niamh D'Arcy, Egal, my goodness, what a great innovation. And to have women involved in it, that is not lost on me either. So thank you very much. And thank you for the male allies that obviously are working with you. That allyship is so important.
Huge.
It's
really
hugely
huge.
important. But for now, thank you so much for your time. And anyone watching this, please connect with this organisation because they're amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Amantha.
having me.
It was wonderful. So much fun.
Thank you.